Hey folks, I'm Sam Faddis. This is Ground Truth. We're talking Iranian sleeper cells today. As this war with Iran drags on and expands, there's increasing concern about the possibility that we're going to have Iranian sleeper cells go active on U.S. soil and start carrying out attacks. Things are going to start blowing up. People are going to get killed here. So we want to talk a little bit today about, what the heck are we talking about? What is a sleeper cell, and do we need to worry about this? So, first of all, a couple of caveats up front. I'm going to use the term sleeper cell because that's what the press likes to use, and that's what Hollywood is obsessed with. That's not really the technical terminology that would be used inside the intelligence community or law enforcement community. They'd be talking about non-commercially covered officers, and names of specific groups, and all sorts of technical jargon would be used. But we're going to stick with sleeper cells just because, again, that's what average Americans who have better things to do than chase Iranian terrorists use and understand. The other thing to understand up front before we start getting into the details here is what we're not talking about. Periodically you read about ICE or the Border Patrol or FBI or somebody picking up somebody who's an Iranian citizen who showed up in the United States, typically illegally, and when they check out the background, they find out once upon a time this guy was in the Iranian military, maybe Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. Okay, that's what I would call low-hanging fruit. Just some poor schmuck that ended up on our soil, probably just trying to get away from Iran. And because of his connections, he ends up being deported. He entered illegally. Okay, I'm not disputing that. I think that's a good start. The point is that's not what we're looking for. And we're also not looking for, the 17-year-old punk kid who's online watching too many jihad videos and now imagines that he's Osama bin Laden. Those are the easy pickings. What we're talking about here are pros. We're talking about folks that are sent here, highly trained individuals, operatives, working for the Iranians, and undercover. They know what they're doing, and they have specific jobs and specific targets even. So from what groups? Well, MOIS, which is Iranian CIA, sure. IRGC, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, within the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is kind of the elite Iranian military. There's an organization called the Quds Force, Quds being Farsi, Persian, for Jerusalem. These guys specialize in working abroad, staging terrorist attacks, and in particular working with Iranian proxies, Iranian surrogates, groups like Hezbollah, that many of their members are not Iranian, not Persian, but these guys work hand in glove. They work together. So we're talking about MOIS, we're talking about IRGC, the Quds Force, and we're also talking about operatives sent here by people like Hezbollah, which proxy groups, surrogate groups, groups that are equipped and trained and supported by the Iranians. But these guys send their own operatives here or to many places. So is this a real thing? I mean, is this something you need to worry about? Yeah, it's a real thing. The Iranians do this. They do this on a broad scale. And we know they're doing it right now. The Greeks have, in the last year or so, wrapped up multiple teams on their soil. The Cypriots the same. The Turks the same. The Qataris the same in the Persian Gulf. So teams of operatives have been wrapped up in multiple countries in recent times. I mean, some of these are literally within the last month or two. And they were casing targets and getting ready to stage attacks. So it's a real thing. These are pros. They're highly trained. Hezbollah, for instance, they train their own guys. They have their own groups within Hezbollah that specialize in this kind of thing. And then, of course, they're trained by the Iranians, and they cooperate with the Iranians. So you got a lot of different capabilities, a lot of different units here. They operate in alias. So they're not showing up in true name, and they're not just using a name that they throw away, like I just made up a name. They're going to have documentation that supports this. That means passports, their driver's license, whatever you can imagine that they should have, they will have. It'll look legit, and in many cases, it's what we call backstopped, meaning they have false documents from some other country, but in one way or the other, the Iranians have arranged for that country to backstop them. Meaning, if I jack you up and I got your passport and I contact the country that issued the passport and I ask him, is this guy legit? That country is going to say, yeah, he's legit. Makes it really, really difficult to figure out who's who. What's an example? Recently, many of these teams I was referring to in Greece and in Cyprus and Turkey that have been wrapped up have been using Azeri documents saying that the guy's from Azerbaijan. You got to be able to live your cover. You got to be able to pull off your cover. If I'm an Iranian and I look of Persian ethnicity and so forth, I'm not going to pass myself off as a Norwegian, suffice it to say. But there's a lot of overlap between Azeris and Iranians, a lot of Azeris that actually live in Iran. So this is a believable cover. The guy presumably can speak the language. He can pull this off. What do they do when they get here? Well, they come here, they set up, and they stay long term. And in some cases, that's many, many years. In other cases, it's, a year. But the point is, they don't just get off the plane and then start running around casing targets. They sink in, they have jobs, they have residences, they are living their cover, and they're very, very cognizant of the fact that people may be looking for them. So they expect surveillance, they expect phone taps, they know how to live their covers, they know how to do whatever job they've been told to do, and they have some kind of secure communications with Tehran, meaning they're not talking on an open phone line trying to double talk things like in some silly movie. That might be satellite communications, that might be some sort of internet-based communications, but something secure so they can report back home and they can receive direction from back home. And they're going to then proceed to, or are, I'm sure the ones that are here, have already long since begun to case targets. So whatever they were told to do, they start working on it day one. If their job is to stage attacks in New York City, and then they go out and they identify targets that are targets that Tehran wants to hit. So maybe that might be the Empire State Building, Statue of Liberty. These, by the way, are real targets that we know have been cased by these kinds of folks. And they're casing to stage some kind of attack, an explosives attack, an attack with weapons, whatever it is. Meaning they're making book on all security. They're taking photographs, they're drawing sketches, they're clocking security, they're testing security. They drop a bag at the Statue of Liberty. A backpack contains nothing but innocuous stuff. But then somebody watches the backpack, to see how long does it take for it to be detected, what happens when it's detected, who shows up, what procedures they do. They are, again, making book. This is what we call casing. They are breaking this down. This is not just an aspiration, hey, let's go attack the Empire State Building. They are building a plan, same as our military would build a plan, very, very detailed. And they do it slowly, and they do it in stages, and they're very, very careful. So guys are trained to case. They can measure a room by looking at how big the ceiling tiles are and how many ceiling tiles there are, how many floor tiles there are, other methodologies, or just as they walk across the room, keeping count of their pace. I mean, this is all standard stuff that's done by people in this line of work. But the point is, the guy is cognizant of the fact that security could stop him at any time, shake him down. He doesn't want to have a stack of notes. If he takes pictures, the pictures are going to be the kind of pictures that if somebody stops him and looks at his phone or whatever he's using, they look like normal tourist pictures. Very slow, very careful, understanding that they're subject to scrutiny. They're going to have the same approach at home wherever they store this material. Very, very careful about where they store it, how much they store it, all of these kinds of things. When they get to the point where they're planning for the attack in detail, they're going to start accumulating explosives, accumulating weapons, and then they're going to do what we call caching them. It means they're going to put them someplace secure and stored. They're reporting all of this back to Tehran. They update these plans periodically. And they are waiting for the go signal. And at some point, Tehran's going to tell them the balloon's going up. At that point, they may strike, or it may turn out that Hezbollah sends in a separate team. A separate team that has access to all the information that's been collected and knows where to go find the explosives and knows where to go find the weapons, but may in fact not actually have any contact with these guys on the ground. Why? Because that means if the attackers try to blow up the Empire State Building and they screw it up and they get caught, they can't give up any information on these long-term assets, and then these long-term assets are still in place, and they can start planning for round two. They can start planning for the next attack. This is what we call in the trade compartmentation. There's no reason why the attackers necessarily need to know anything about who acquired the information, how it was acquired, what their covers are, what their identities are. Again, if they get wrapped up, your long-term assets they've invested all this equity in are still there. Point is, very, very disciplined, very, very careful, very, very highly trained, working for some very smart people, and whatever targets they're going to hit, they're not making that up on the fly. They already decided a long time ago. They're ready to rock and roll at the drop of a hat. That's what you're looking for. Not an easy thing to find those guys and stop them before they carry out an attack. But next time, that's exactly what we're going to talk about, because it isn't impossible either. Now that we know we have a legitimate threat from these so-called sleeper cells on our soil, how do we stop them before they strike? Thanks for watching. See you next time on Ground Truth.